think we should get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Michaela Parker, founder and executive director for the Academic Data Science Alliance, and I'm here to welcome you to our ADSA Career Panel Series, where we demystify the data work in a number of careers, sectors, and domains. And I'm here with my co-host and the moderator of this panel, Stella Min. But first, I wanted to give some of you an overview of the Academic Data Science Alliance, or ADSA. In case you're not familiar, we are a community of data science researchers and educators who take responsibility for a just, equitable future, where data science approaches are thoughtfully applied in all domains for the benefit of all. On this slide at the bottom is a QR code. If you use your mobile phone, you can snap that. It'll take you to our website where you can learn more about ADSA's events, activities, and how to become a member. And so with that, I believe, yes, I am now turning it over to Stella.
So today we're joined by Dr. Emily Gade, who is an assistant professor of political science at Emory University. Her research focuses on the causes, nature, and outcomes of political violence, in addition to insecurity among minority groups, state repression, and various forms of resistance. Emily is also an impressive athlete. She competed at the 2012 US Olympic trials for rowing, and she ran the 2018 Boston Marathon. Today, you'll also hear from Dr. Andrea Jones-Rooy, who is the Director of Undergraduate Studies and a visiting associate professor at the NYU Center for Data Science. They hold a PhD in political science from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and was previously a postdoctoral fellow in social science and decision science at Carnegie Mellon University, the founding director of the interdisciplinary major in quantitative social science at NYU Shanghai, it's a mouthful, and a quantitative researcher at the media outlet 538. They talk a lot about political science and data science on social media, at corporate events, and even during stand-up comedy sets. Last but not least, you'll hear from Dr. Gonzalo Rivero, who is the Associate Director of Data Labs at Pew Research Center. Prior to joining the Pew, he worked as a statistician and data scientist at the Statistics and Evaluation Sciences Unit of WestStat and the Scientific Research Group of YouGov. So to kick off our discussion, I thought we could begin with what attracted the panelists to their political science careers and how their training informs their work today. So I thought, Emily, maybe you could kick us off here.
I guess in terms of what my kind of current role looks like, I teach, but I am on a 70% research appointment. So I mostly teach in the falls. At this point, I have some course releases that help me kind of have a lot of free research time. And with that time, I run a lab that's focused on mostly undergraduate data science informed research practices, but definitely a social science focused substantively, and is trying to kind of inject data sensibilities into undergraduate experiential education. And that's, I think, the thing that I'm most excited about. And I also teach in the graduate sequence text as data, like applied natural language processing methods to the social sciences. And so that's kind of what I'm up to day to day. And I think in terms of thinking about like what is most fun about that role or what I'm most excited about, it's definitely the kind of lab structure that I've built. So I can send anybody who's interested a little bit more. We are kind of modeling an experiential education practice that was really informed by the Carpentries and Academic Data Science Alliance and other things like that in terms of trying to break down just math, data, statistics, coding, and make it as accessible as possible. So students from backgrounds that maybe didn't have as robust high school training in those areas feel safe to try, fail, recover from failure, and then eventually succeed at those kinds of methodologies and think about how to use them to answer social science questions. Most recently, I'm partnering with the Carnegie Foundation to use a combination of data science and social science training and experiential education as a paid curriculum for students in a goal of diversifying security studies spaces, basically.
maybe we can turn it to Andrea. Can you share a little bit about your interest in political science and your day-to-day?
Sure. Thanks. It's always nice to meet other political scientists. I hang out these days at the Center for Data Science at NYU. I didn't even wear the shirt on purpose, but I have like a team jersey on. So sorry about that. I wear it like every day because I don't. Okay, anyway. So I don't get to be around many political scientists because it's a much more interdisciplinary area. But I started in political science, and that's where my one true love. Sorry, everyone else. I got into political science and eventually data science totally by accident, in the sense that I'll spare you the big sob story, but I was in undergrad and I studied international relations, and I was very moved by, sweeping essays about the inevitability of war and human nature and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to go to a PhD program and study this more. And it turns out that political science is not necessarily just the sweeping essays that I thought I was going to write. And so I went to the University of Michigan, which has I didn't know at the time, but a very strong quantitative program. And so I showed up thinking I was going to read just Hobbes all year. And they were like, here's matrix algebra. And I was like, why are we doing this? So it very much stumbled into it without a strong quantitative background, or at least an awareness that I was interested in quantitative things. And so during that time, I went from very like, I can't do this, I'm freaking out, I just want to argue about fundamentals of human nature and evil. And then I was like, actually, there's something to this whole data thing. And while I was there, I've been out of grad school maybe about 10 years. And so right around as I was finishing up, using text as data was starting to become something in my field. And so I was able to incorporate a lot of those early versions of those techniques for my research on authoritarian censorship in China. And so my research is on how countries that have control over the media use the media to signal foreign sort of international behavior intent. And so I use some early quantitative, text analysis tools to do some research on Chinese coverage of international events for my dissertation. And then from there, as you said in the opening, I was at the Center for Social and Decision Science at Carnegie Mellon. And then I moved to NYU Shanghai, where I did some interdisciplinary quantitative work in social science. And that's how I came to data science. I kind of went from a more political science focus to really being interested in the methodology. So, as Emily said, sort of how do we use text as data, and how do we turn the messy, complex, abstract world, things like democracy and freedom and happiness and legitimacy of a regime, all those interesting questions that have moved me from the beginning. I really got addicted to thinking about how to turn that into data and how to evaluate the data and do things with that data. So now I teach data science for everyone at NYU, where we do have some politics students. We also have students from lots of different fields, and we talk about all those sorts of things. And I also teach an upper level course on natural language processing. And I do a lot of consulting these days with companies as well, using a lot of the techniques I picked up as a political scientist. So a lot of companies want to find out things like, do people like working here? What are our engagement levels? Do people feel like they belong? And so I've found it's been quite, my political science training in measuring lofty, confusing things like democracy has actually been helpful in working with companies to think that stuff through. So there we go. And I do some sort of outreachy political science stuff as well.
Great. Thank you. Gonzalo, how about you?
Hi. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. My story is actually remarkably similar to Andrea's. Instead of IR, I actually started in history and stumbled upon political science by accident. My original purpose was to do economics. I was mostly attracted to the methodology. It was a bad thing to be attracted to, but I mean, I really liked the approach, how everything was in theory well founded and clean and neat and very close and all that. But I ended up in political science because I think that at the end of the day, it offered me something that was closer to the kind of questions that I was mostly interested in: origins of political inequality and origins of the state, mostly questions related to political theory, absolutely nothing related to methods. But over time, kind of my original interest in how research is done and political methodology, political epistemology kind of came back, and ended up spending a lot more time just on statistics, maths, partly also because I'm from NYU and As Andrea know, it's a very strong program in poli-sci. It was right before they created the Center for Data Science. By the end of the program, I kind of wanted to go into academia, but at the same time, it was neither a good year to be in the job market, nor I was super persuaded that that was the kind of trajectory that I wanted to take. It was hard to choose where you could live. The idea of spending 6 years working on topics related to my dissertation in order to make it easier for me to get a tenure, that didn't feel as attractive. So I ended up taking a career in industry and taking advantage of technical training. So I ended up moving into data science, partly by accident, partly because I was interested in methodology. And at that point, that was what data science was. And partly taking advantage of some training that made sense, I think, for the market. So I first ended up in YouGov, which is a survey research company on the panel. The office that I worked for was the one hosting the scientific research group, which meant that I was able to do both industry work, but at the same time also work with academics. We ended up mostly doing a lot of surveys and survey experiments for a lot of people in the community. And then that kind of proximity to survey research with a background in poli-sci and an emphasis in methodology kind of led me through my rest of my career. So I then moved to Westat, which is government contractor, mostly focused on original data collection, doing mostly large probabilistic data sets. Think health and education, not so much public opinion. And then I ended up where I am right now in the Pew Research Center, kind of coming back to my original love for social research, taking advantage of the experience that I acquired during my brief stint in survey research, and also using a lot of technical skills to complement the kind of research that the center is known for in the survey side, with new data sources and new methodological approaches in data labs.
Great. Before I kind of switch over, do you want to share some of the most challenging and fun aspects of your job?
Is that to me?
Sure,
Sorry.
Emily.
Okay,
I
am
know that I
really
kinda cut you
sorry,
off
you guys.
before you
I'm
started
getting
to
like
share
every
that.
third word of this, and I tried to adjust my internet connection, but it's not quite stable. So hopefully you can hear me. But yeah, I realized I didn't actually answer the question that you asked the first time, and instead I answered that question. Whatever. So I'll just say a really quick thing. I got into data science also totally by accident. And yeah, I was a ranch hand after college. I worked at a farm in Arkansas, and then I went and I didn't want to take the GRE, so I went to grad school in the UK to avoid having to take the GRE. And then I graduated in the financial crisis, and so I couldn't get a job. I applied to like 100 different jobs and was still nannying with my master's degree from LSE. And I ended up going back to do a PhD as a result of that. And then in that time really discovered that I really liked data science and got a lot of training from some of the precursors to Academic Data Science Alliance. So that was where I was at, and it was a little bit circuitous, but yeah, I think favorite parts of my job, as I said before, have to do with kind of really working in depth one-on-one with undergrads and grad students, or in like small teams. I find that the most rewarding and encouraging part of my job for sure, and helping them like achieve whatever their research aims are. I think challenges for me tend to come in the form of, I have just kind of weird things that I like to do. Like I taught a class in prison while I was at UW, and I really want to teach a class at Emory that's half about oppression and resistance, that's half prisoners and half Emory students, and things like that that don't fit very well within the conventional academic framework. And so Sometimes I I think they just don't totally know what to do with me. I'd say those are the challenges, is just like wanting to do weird things and getting really excited about them where other people are perhaps not quite so excited.
That's awesome. You should share it with others, especially our community sometime, of how you're able to push those initiatives forward. I know that we have probably a lot of members who would be interested in making proposals like that. Yeah. Okay, how about you, Andrea? Do you want to share some of your joys, your day-to-day joys and challenges?
You can see from my knives behind me, I have all kinds of challenges I'm trying to overcome at the moment. First, Emily, oh my gosh, I think your project with half with inmates and half with Emory students sounds incredible. And I would love to hear more about it as well. What are the joys? My great joys in life are with respect to data science and all of life. I think I really love getting to work with people, whether they're students or people in companies or people at like NGOs or anywhere in the world, who are like really smart and really thoughtful and really care about particular issues. I tend to sort of tread in social justice-y spaces, but not exclusively. And there's a lot of really talented, thoughtful, concerned, caring people who want to make a difference in the world and address various problems that are around, but who have been, I think, now I'm on a soapbox, who have been, I think, wrongly led to believe they're not math people or like not capable of doing data science or participating in data science or working with data. And I think that their subject matter expertise is absolutely crucial and is like a big missing ingredient in a lot of the data science I see happening in practice. Not always, but that's a big part of it. So I really love, it's hard to find these folks sometimes, because people who select into, say, an undergrad data science course or a corporate data science training tend to be ones who already sort of feel comfortable poking around and teaching themselves Python based on YouTube, and maybe have always thought of themselves as more kind of STEM focused people. But I really, when I do get to coax people into my class or get to talk to people who are maybe mid-career, say, experts in HR practice and are kind of curious and intimidated by data science, I really love talking to them and working with them and helping them see how they can participate in data science. And when people say, oh, I like, because I remember the feeling of being like, these numbers are useful. And it's just really fun. And it's a whole new world that you can play in, and sort of like getting people into that sandbox is a great joy for me. A great frustration is probably, I'll limit it to two. I could do an airing of grievances for some time, but I generally like it more than I don't, which is why I'm here. Two big ones. One is the flip side of that, which is I have a lot of students and colleagues and people I consult with who have a bit of hubris about the world because they're very technical. And so they say, well, I can do this, deep learning, whatever. I can make, the next chat GPT 3 or whatever. And that's great. But I think there's a similar kind of lack of understanding and appreciation for subject matter expertise, talking to people in the field, getting to know the real challenges on the ground of whatever problem you're trying to swoop in and help with. I'm not saying you always need to like dive down, and I'm not saying everyone needs to be quantitative, but I just sort of, that gap irritates me on both sides. And the other one, and maybe this is relevant to our conversation today, and I was so excited you wanted to ask about political science in particular, is that nobody knows what any of my fields are. Nobody knows what political science is. Nobody knows what data science is, in the sense of everyone either has a different idea or, if you're not in the field, you have absolutely no clue. So I went into political science thinking I was going to write op-eds for, foreign affairs or whatever. And that's what most people think I do if I say I do political science, whereas I'd actually be a horrible op-ed writer. And then if I say I do data science, if you're someone who isn't really involved in data science, you assume that I'm like making robots or something like that. And so I find that having to kind of either talk people down or up on what it is that I do, and I do the same thing, but if I brand it political science or I brand it data science, I get very different responses. A lot of people will be like, data science is not or political science is not a science, and I have to like have that argument. And then if I say data science, they say like, they assume I know everything, and I don't. So that, like, we have some PR work to do, and that's part of my mission as well.
I can totally relate to that as someone who has a background in sociology, where I am also very much having to explain what sociology is.
Do people just think, not just, but do people assume you're like a social worker or?
Yes, they often do. Yeah. And I remember in one of my interviews, I was once asked if I had taken a math class, and it was for a statistics position. It was for a statistician. And I was like, yes, I have taken math classes.
No, my first ever academic job, I had done some very basic game theory, like literally like prisoner's dilemma matrix on my whiteboard in my office with a student during office hours. And an econ professor, like in the social sciences, a senior econ professor walked by and looked at it and he was like, oh, I didn't know you used math and political science. And you're like, all right, man. So, but
I also have an undergrad in econ, so I understand that too.
Yep.
How about you, Gonzalo?
I consider myself pretty lucky. I'm at a place in which I can do research and I can touch on many different topics. Everything that the center covers is pretty impressive, and the possibility of contributing to that agenda with the freedom of research that we have, and more importantly, with the mandate that my team has to be creative and original and try to introduce new things, is very exciting. It's the thing that gets me out of bed every morning, the possibility of, well, there are these important research questions. I'm surrounded by people who is going to be contributing to the public debate around them, and my role is to contribute to that with an additional perspective of adding what else is out there that is not just survey research that can help us understand a little bit better what is the kind of trends that are happening around us. So the thing that I really like about my job is my job in itself. I mean, the fact that I'm able to do these things. My position in particular as manager is something that I've grown to enjoy more and more, because it's something that gives me the opportunity to see the full scope of what it is that the team is doing. I really like doing research and getting heads down on a research project, reading, coding, writing, whatever. But as a manager, I have the opportunity of see everything that everybody else is doing, contributing to the direction of the research agenda that we have. What are the topics that we are going to be exploring, how we are going to be exploring them, how we are going to be writing about that, which is something that I really appreciate as someone who is interested not just in the how-to of research, but in also the results of research at the end of the day. The thing that is moderately annoying, and it's not just a special fact about the current location of my team within the center, but more generally about data science, more broadly, and based on my experience in industry, is still 15 years later that we still don't know what data science is. And it's not so much that the concept is broad, but the fact that depending on who you talk to, the definition that you're going to get, the tasks that they are going to be thinking about, the training that they're going to be thinking about, the profile and contributions that they're going to be thinking about is completely different. Right now, as a matter of fact, my team tends to avoid the name data science, and we kind of favor computational social science, because I think that it emphasizes social research and the fact that we use computers a little bit more than everybody else. But at previous places in statistics, data science was mostly the person who would do much more software engineering with a little bit more machine learning. In some other places, it was the people kind of more on the engineering side. In some other places, it's building and developing models. I think that nowadays there is a big trend that A/B testing is kind of the thing that data scientists do, which is fine. I think that it comes with the fact that maybe data science is reaching some level of maturity, but the level of indefinition always creates this challenge in which it's never enough to say that you work on data science. You have to go much, much deeper about what it is that you actually do, how it is that you contribute to the final goal of the organization, and how you relate to the people around you. And that is, on a practical level, complicated, because, again, it's not so much what it is that you contribute, but also how it is that you collaborate with the people around you. At previous positions, my role as contributor would emphasize the fact that I have more training on software engineering than a traditional statistician. At my current role, it probably has to do more, not so much with a method, because I don't expect survey researchers to do a lot of deep learning, but mostly with the framework for reproducibility, how it is that I use the toolkit that I use. So that kind of mismatch that comes from the broad definition of data science is always something that is slightly problematic. And it's problematic for me right now, and I think that it's problematic for anybody going to the market, because applying for a position that is just called data science is not the most important thing. Every time I have been interviewing for jobs, I always have the same problem, that I have to have a 10-minute conversation with someone to explain what they actually mean and what it is that they want and need.
Yeah, Michaela can speak a lot more to this, but this is exactly why ADSA exists. We work with a lot of leaders who kind of struggle with finding definitions and attracting talent and retaining talent based on the way that they define their roles and how they compensate them and how they are asking them to allocate their time. Yeah, it's very complicated and difficult. Okay, well, so stepping back a little bit, I want to talk a little bit more about your careers that you have now and what you found the most helpful in preparing for your careers. What advice would you give to students out there who maybe want a career like yours? Emily, do you want to start the conversation? Oh, you're on mute.
Just realized that. Great. You'd think after all this Zoom time we'd be on it, but no. Okay, was that career advice for students?
Career advice for students.
Okay. Yeah.
About tips that helped you kind of land your career.
Yeah, so I am in one of the, I feel very fortunate to be in a tenure track role. And so there's a lot of advice on how to do that. And I don't think I have any better advice than is already out there. In a lot of ways, I think it's a lot luck and just having the right luck at the right time. But what I will say in terms of thinking about if you think you might want to be a faculty member in a tenure track role that does like political and data science, that is a powerful combination. There are not a lot of social scientists who are teched up, and so it can make you more marketable. I think that was definitely the case for me. So that's still something of a novelty in the social sciences. If you can figure out how to be competent as a social scientist and a data scientist, it can help you. I think it's a powerful combination. Another thing I would say just generally about advice is a lot of times I hear people, especially in higher ed, say, this is the way you have to do it. This is the only way to do it. And what I wish people would remember is that everybody who as a professor or whatever got there a different path. Like if you look at their CVs, every single person did it a different way. So anybody who's telling you that there's only one way to do it is probably wrong, right? Because it was all different. So that's my usual general advice. The other thing I would say is for students, I often have students come into my office that say they're triple majoring and doing all these things. And I would say quality over quantity. It's better to have deep relationships with a couple faculty members or really good letter of rec writers, or have people that are able to really speak to and demonstrate your commitment to a topic or an idea or a club or whatever, rather than have sort of a smattering of a lot of random things that you never really saw through. So better to have straight A's and one major than not such a great, grades in three. So definitely, I would say once you're applying, like if you're in graduate school and you're on the academic job market, you do need to have, not need, but it is definitely common or desirable to have a personal website. I ended up making mine only when I started applying for academic jobs, just because you can kind of curate your work and control the narrative about how you want to be framed as a scholar. And I think that's valuable because people do Google you, it definitely happens. And that's one of the first things I think people do now. And so if you can kind of say, this is what I want you to understand about me really quickly, rather than them finding your Facebook page or some other kind of media that you'd prefer, that not be their first impression. That's definitely something. There's a lot of advice out there for writing application statements. There's a blog called The Professor is In, which I found very useful, that gives details about like just how to apply for different jobs. And I don't think I have anything better to add than all those many resources that already exist, but happy to help or share my materials or anything else with somebody who's actively going through that process now.
Thank you. Andrea, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. So all excellent advice. And I'm having like a conversation with Torbit. Torbit, correct me if I'm saying your name incorrectly. Back end and front end data science about data analytics, which I'm so glad you brought up, because that's one of the terms that I'm selfishly asking about, because I don't really know what it means. My loose understanding, which is why I'm asking, is that it's like data science in the workplace, but I could be totally wrong. So I appreciate this. Speaking of no one knows what data science is, I'm literally like, what do you think is happening? So thank you for this. It's very helpful. I will actually say I have maybe the opposite advice as Emily, but not in a contradictory way, just in terms of what it depends on sort of what your goals are. So I feel very fortunate that I have been able to, it's going to sound more deliberate than it was at the time, like weave in and out of academia. And from the beginning, I haven't really been dead set on a tenure track job. And so I left, I was on the tenure track, and then I left and worked at like 538 and read a lot of YouGov surveys. So thank you, Gonzalo, for that. You all are great. And then went back to academia and went back out. And if that's a path that interests you, then allow me to recommend a triple major where you don't do very well in any of them, because that's what I did in college. And I should have listened earlier on to my own interests. I think that a formal, like actual tenure track, tenure job in academia is not right for me. And I think that evidence of the fact that I was interested in 100 different things and didn't do any of them particularly well is a sign of that. One of the things that I love about data science is that it is so interdisciplinary that it's been a better home for me than political science, in the sense that I'm not cut out for a career in like actual political science research. So the political science training has been very informative. I care a lot about politics, but the data science side of it allows me to weave in and out of academia and corporate worlds and consulting and stuff a little bit more. So I will say that when Emily gave her advice that was like, do one thing and get A's, if you thought, yes, then great, do that. If you thought, oh gosh, is there no place for me? I've taken 100 different classes and none of them are related. I think there's room for you as well. But I'm also currently writing a book about how we need more people who do that, because I'm self-involved. All right.
Thanks. How about you, Gonzalo? Do you have anything to add?
I feel extremely sympathetic to the idea that luck has played a huge role in my career. If I had stick to my original plans and everything went according to what I wanted to do, I'd be in a different and most likely worse place. I was extremely lucky at crucial moments. That is not good advice. I mean, be lucky. It's like something that my advisor used to say, be me 40 years ago, get your PhD before academy went to the current place.
Yeah, don't live through a pandemic. That's
exactly.
That's some good advice.
Yes.
Pick an era where
Yes.
that isn't happening.
But I think that it's important to recognize the role of luck and incorporate it into your decision making. For a couple of reasons. One is, to some extent, the job market, regardless of whether it's in industry or in academia, it's a numbers game, and you have to be lucky and you have to be comfortable with sending a lot of applications and not hearing back. Dealing with frustration is something that is, unfortunately, part of what happens when you apply for jobs. Also understanding that a lot of people who are going to be in positions that you want to have and some have your similar profile just had luck, not take things way too personally. Be nice to yourself is always a good advice, regardless of whether it's data science or anything else. Whenever you go to the market, be aware of the fact that there is a lot of randomness happening in the process. And that means that a lot of the decisions are driven by randomness, which on our side is typically perceived as luck. but yeah, in terms of more practical advice, as someone who has hired a large number of people in technical roles, a couple of things. One is it depends a lot on your level of seniority and the kind of role that you're applying for. But one common advice is that don't try to over-engineer engineers. If you come from political science, if you come from a social science background, don't try to present yourself as an engineer who's going to be a better technical person than a technical person with a technical background. Embrace your background and be aware that your background is more and more something that people want. In all sorts of companies, not only in tech, but absolutely not only in social research, there is room for people who are going to be building systems and people who are going to be understanding how the systems interact with people. And for that, having a background in social research is extremely, extremely helpful. So by all means, especially if you go into a technical career track like data science, do get some technical training as much as you can. There is no technical class that is going to be unnecessary. It's always going to be useful, but always be aware of the fact that if you are coming from a social background, just embrace it, present yourself as such, take advantage of that. You have a unique contribution to make that is not just in terms of coding. The other thing, and this is mostly thinking about times in which I've been involved in hiring more senior roles, PhDs, and so on, is a PhD is a signal. It's nothing else. It's not a rubber stamp of your intelligence or that the fact that you are the smartest kid in the class. There are extremely smart people around you that didn't go for a PhD. A PhD is a choice, something that you decided to do because of whatever reasons you had, and you had the time, the interest, and the stamina to do that. But other people took other decisions, and they are as smart, if not more sometimes. That is not to say that a PhD is not a good choice. It's just a particular training that you have to learn how to take advantage of. It's something that trains you in how to do research, in how to communicate your research, in how to understand messy debate and how to make your dent in that debate. And it's pretty much something that a lot of companies want. It may not be immediately transparent or immediately obvious for everybody, but it's a valuable skill. But again, the thing is to warn against the fact that because you have this fancy degree and a postnominal and some list of publications, that somehow you are entitled to some deference because you are the smartest person that this interviewer is going to be talking to in their day. I think that there is a lot to be said about the data science market, precisely because the data science concept is extremely broad. And I think that we can probably fine-tune the advice to your specific situation, what it is that you want to do, what it is that you have done so far. But I think that I would take those two things in mind. On the one hand, luck unfortunately plays a lot of role, not only in data science, but pretty much in any career. And to embrace the things that you've done and be upfront about that. Don't try to present yourself with a technical background or a technical perspective that is not what you've chosen to do.
Yeah, this is all very great advice. So we recognize that there's a bit of luck to getting your job, certainly, and even to some aspect of landing an interview. But can you maybe share some tips on communicating the value of your skills, and particularly during an in-person or interview, when you get past that like 30-minute quick check of a phone call? Emily, do you want to start with tips, particularly in academia?
Yeah, man, interviewing in academia is a whole thing. And I certainly don't have a magic bullet or anything figured out. I think the thing again, there's a ton of advice online about interviewing for academic jobs. I think read a lot and use your kind of own judgment about the things that are going to work best for you. For me, it was useful. I would say there were a couple of things that I think helped me that I would pass on that I don't think are often communicated. The first is I recorded my job talk on my phone and listened to it while I did all sorts of other stuff. And that helped me be, I think, more comfortable as I was giving the talk, just because when people interrupt you or whatever, I had heard it a bunch of times. So I'm an auditory learner, so that's a really good strategy for me. I think if you think about how you learn and come up with a strategy that helps you with that. The other thing I would say that people don't do enough, I think, is practice Q&A for job talks. I think that's actually often where you get the job. And I think the most important thing in those is to not be defensive about your work, is to know and acknowledge all of the limitations, come up with reasons why you proceeded with the project anyway, have those well thought out and backed up, and be able to critically engage and solicit more feedback as you're doing that project. So they're looking for someone who's a good colleague, who really understands the problems with their project and can think and talk about them astutely, rather than somebody who's trying to pretend there's nothing wrong with their science. So those are a few things. I would say the actual interviews are just really weird. It's a bunch of back-to-back 30-minute interviews with people. I looked everybody up in advance when I was on the job market, and I tried to send thank you letters or thank you emails to everyone that I met with. I have no idea if that was helpful. It is good to have something to say. And then it is important to just be yourself. I think in some ways, you can do yourself a disservice. There's pros to doing anything you can to try to fit into a certain job, but if you end up in a job that isn't a good fit for you, you're sort of stuck with it, and it's hard to move. So I think there can be downsides to manipulating what you say you want to do or whatever to try to fit the job better. Though that is also, of course, a privileged thing to be able to say as somebody that has a job. I do hear that, but you want one that's a good fit for you also.
Great advice. How about you, Andrea? Do you have tips?
Yeah,
you kind of bridged multiple different industries.
Yeah, my tips mostly come down to do as I say, not as I do. But I wanted to first, because I don't know that the chat will make it to the YouTube recording. So if anyone's watching, I wanted to say that Emily and I have had a nice chat about our advice. And I think from the previous question, I think for both of us, it boils down to don't feel like you, and Emily, correct me if I'm misstating, it doesn't, don't feel like you need to do lots of different things because you have pressure to do clubs and service and leadership and this and this and this. Do what is most interesting to you and follow your curiosity insofar as you're able to do that. And then I think on my message is basically the same thing, which is don't feel like you need to just limit yourself to one field. If you're really interested, say, I have students who do data science and piano, and they come and they say, I better stop piano, I'll be seen as not serious. And while that is a reality, I think that embracing both of those interests. So I think we both agree that you want to follow your curiosity and don't get too weighed down on the shoulds. And sort of just to add to Gonzalo's point, with luck, a lot of the advice, and I think Emily just said this really well with job interviews too, is you want to be as close to honest and your authentic self as you can, given that we do need to, get a job and there's very real material concerns there. But one of the things that I've fallen into as a trap, as I've prepared for job interviews, as I've thought about what skills I needed to gain or what classes I should take in order to be more appealing to potential employers, is none of us knows what's going to happen. And right now, particular areas of data science are really hot. I would say, for example, Texas data, natural language processing is one of many areas that's really, really exciting right now. But don't go into that field and don't present yourself as a natural language processing person, or as Gonzalo correctly said, as an engineer or someone that you're not, just to get a job, because in the long run, it's not going to go well for you. It's not going to go well for them. And you're really going to make your own life harder. And it is hard to switch later on, as Emily said. I think that, if you're interested in hey, I'm interested in this intersection of, say, justice in the legal system or criminal justice in the United States, and I don't see a lot of research in data science that's really around that. If I talk about that in data science, maybe they won't take me seriously, or if I go that direction, maybe I won't be able to bring data science in. I actually think that you can. And some of Emily's examples of the kinds of classes she's teaching are examples of the fact that you you can navigate your own path and you'll be a more interesting candidate. You'll be a stronger candidate. Your own life will be more enjoyable and you'll make a difference that you want to make if you follow your own interests and your curiosities. And insofar as you're comfortable about that, you're able to be transparent in the interview process with kind of who you are. And this, I'll say a final thing here, will come from a very privileged position as well, because I have a job. And so it's easy for me to sit here and say this, but I've applied to and not gotten lots and lots of different jobs. And as Michaela said in the chat, I didn't really talk about this in the opening, but I'm also a stand-up comedian and a circus performer on the side. And I used to interview for jobs and I would take all the stuff off the internet that had any evidence of that. I had stage names, I had alternate profiles. I would come in and say, I'm a very serious scholar. And I would get the job. And then I would try to go to my circus things. And then my bosses would be like, what are you doing? What is all that? And that was really bad. I was very lucky that I was able to eventually parlay, I experiment with being on the job market. I had a job so I could be a little bit more freewheeling in other interviews. And I started using it more as a litmus test rather than something to hide. And so I've been very, very lucky to now at NYU, when I first interviewed there, they said, well, why do you want to come to New York? And I was like, well, it's the place to be for stand-up. And they were like, and then the fact that they were okay with it was a really good sign to me that I would really like working there. And so they're tolerant of it. Of course, you want to stay professional and all those sorts of things. So insofar as you can be your, heavy air quotes, because it's kind of a buzzword, authentic self, it really can actually strengthen your case, and it can make you a better, make sure that you're in a place where people are going to appreciate you for who you are. I get that there is a lot of barriers to that, and that's not realistic for everyone, but insofar as you can, let me finally say one other thing. I read a lot of student application essays for like graduate programs, and I write a lot of letters for students for graduate programs. And the temptation, I think, is to sound so professional and serious about your work that you end up sounding like everyone else. So think about sort of what is your own drive? Why are you getting into this field? What is it you hope to accomplish? What do you think you're going to get out of the thing that you're doing? And why do you think they might be interested in you? And be as authentic as you can about that. That doesn't mean you have to be like, and I do these wild and crazy things, but just to really don't be shy to put your personality in. That's the end. I'll stop.
Great. Well, okay. So to that, Gonzalo, do you have anything to add particularly about, since you do a lot of hiring, how do you, what do you look for in candidates, and do you have any tips for people who might be applying for jobs?
Yeah, no, I mean, interviewing is, I don't want to call it an art, but I mean, it's a skill, especially in the industry where you end up doing a lot of interviews. It's something that you quickly realize that it requires a very specific skill set or a very specific way of presenting yourself. First of all, I completely agree with the advice that has been given before. Being honest about your profile, being honest about who you are, presenting your authentic self, that's fundamental always. I will also say that I don't think that there are that many jobs that fall exactly in the intersection between data science and poli-sci outside of research. So the things that I may say may apply a little bit more to the pure data science side of things. But I will mention two things which are extremely basic and yet don't happen as often as they should. One, research the job that you're applying for. Know what it is that the organization is doing. Don't expect that just because they want a data scientist and you present yourself as a data scientist, that is going to be immediately a fit. Know what it is that the organization is trying to do, what their needs are, what their market looks like, what kind of needs and technical and substantive requirements they have. Doing the basic background work of just reading about the organization one day in advance is something that really, really honestly, really comes across in interviews. People who don't really know what it is that you do, and the interview feels like a waste of time from minute one. The second one is, this is gonna sound strange, but to some extent, you make your own role. The organization most of the time has a very clear defined need of what it is that they want, or what are the needs that they have at a particular moment in time. But in the vast majority of cases that I've seen, there is always a lot of uncertainty about the boundaries of what that thing look actually like. So you have a lot of room to build your profile and sell your profile, convince them that you are the person that they need to fill that particular role. This speaks to what I was saying before, that as social scientists, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to sell ourselves as engineers. It's good to sell yourself as a social scientist because that's what you have in your resume. And it speaks to that, the idea that you have an opportunity to convince them that yours, with your background, your experience, your uniqueness, is the kind of thing that they need. Navigating that negotiation is not always easy. You have to know what it is that they want. You want to know how it is that you can contribute to that. But it's the thing that points during the interview that this person is taking this particular application seriously. They know what we do, they have an opportunity to contribute to that, and they want to contribute to that, which is not always something that comes across in interviews. A lot of people tend to see interviews as opportunities to talk about, as situations in which they are expected to talk about technical stuff. But at the end of the day, people who can program in Python, people who can build a machine learning model, they abound. There are a ton of them. What you want is a fit for someone who can contribute to the culture, organization, and mission of the company.
Yeah, this is all really great information. Okay, we have one last question that I think we're going to run up on time. So just want to let everyone know that if you have to go, I totally understand. But our concluding question is basically just, is there anything that you would do differently? If you could do this all again, is there something that you would change about the way that you approached your career? How about you, Emily?
I mean, I feel very fortunate. I have a very good academic job. I like it. There are lots of things to love about the academy. One thing I would say is I did a lot of not right now. Oh, I'll deal with that thing in my personal life later, or I'll sacrifice this thing in the short term to get this longer term thing. One of them I would say is I don't really want to live in Atlanta, for example. It's not a place that I would like to live forever. But I kind of keep deferring things in order to do the next thing that I feel like I'm supposed to do. And I think I think that can be really useful in the short term. It gets you stuff. But I think that if I had advice for my younger self, it would be pay more attention to what you actually want to do, because like this is your life and it's happening now. And so that would be, I don't know what exactly I would change, if anything, but I would just try to like give myself permission to be more attentive to that and less attentive to what I felt like I was supposed to be doing at every stage.
How about you, Andrea?
Yes, I love the airing of regrets. Let's go. Oh God. I think that I wasted a lot of time trying to, kind of as Emily was saying, trying to like decide what to do. And it's very easy to say, trust yourself, but I didn't trust myself. And I thought that because I was interested in multiple worlds, it wasn't feasible. And I thought I should pick one. And so then I think I spent more years trying to decide what field to focus on. I mean, for example, I spent far longer trying to pick a dissertation topic than writing a dissertation. And in the end, it kind of doesn't matter. Just pick one that you like, and then you can do another project later. And so I spent a lot more time kind of hand-wringing and trying to engineer my life, as opposed to just saying, this is what I'm interested in. Why don't I try it? And then to add to that, I think that in this, I don't know if this applies to everyone, but there's a lot of talk in academia in particular. I see this, but it's in other fields, of course, it's everywhere. It's just feeling like you're not good enough. And set that thinking aside. I think if we think we're not good enough, that's probably a sign that we probably do have something interesting to say. It's the people I know who are like, I'm amazing, that you're like, that makes me more nervous. So I think if you find yourself thinking, who am I to do this or to go in this field, or like, it's not going to be any good. If you think that, you're never going to let yourself try it. And I say this as much to myself at this moment as to anyone else, but I think that kind of trusting your own interests and not obsessing too much over which of many paths that you could go down, it's all going to work out and you'll end up where you need to be. Look at me. I'm like a horoscope over here. Yeah.
How about you, Gonzalo? Is there anything you would do differently?
I want to make Emily's response mine. I think that, so things that I should have done differently. Well, I don't know that I would have gotten to the place I am right now, having done things differently in terms of my academic or professional trajectory. But it is true that one of my regrets is not having paid more attention to what I wanted to do from a personal standpoint at some points, and being too driven by professional objectives at some point. I will add something very, very basic that I think would have made a difference for me early on, and not just at the PhD stage, but even earlier on. Talk to people that do the things that you think you want to be doing. You learn a lot from that. You learn a lot of advice that most likely you're going to be ignoring, the same way that I ignore the advice of my own advisor and the people around me. But if you want to go into data science, talk to someone who has the job that you want, what it is that they are doing, how it is that they got there, what are the things that they would have done differently. In very specific instances, it might mean, for instance, if you're on a PhD in political science, talk to your advisor about that. I want to go into data science. When I went into the market, data science was not still a thing, and my department was still very much focused on academic tracks. I think that it's different now, but I think that I would have benefited from being clear about my intentions with my dissertation committee and with my department in general. I think that it could have been a lot easier to go through the interview process and the application process if I had talked to people who had those jobs and could have helped me prepare for interviews, understand a little bit better what it is that I need to prepare for the interviews, how to present my resume, how to present a cover letter, and things like that. And as everybody else has said, I'm talking from a position of privilege. I have the job that I want. I absolutely love it. So it's easy for me to say, but be kind to yourself. It's something that I think I said before, but it's very important. Applying for jobs is hard. Dealing with rejection is hard. It's going to happen. There is going to be a fair amount of rejection. You have to deal with that. But it's important to deal with that from a position in which you understand that it's not your fault. It's hard. There are a lot more applicants than positions. It takes a while to find your space. It takes a while to find your space in industry and then work towards where you want to be. You may end up taking positions that you don't really fit for. It's important to remember that it's not speaking about yourself. It's just, it's a job.
Yeah. This is all wonderful advice, and it can be the concluding advice if our audience here doesn't have any questions. Would anybody like to ask a question? And it's small enough, so if you would like, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask our panelists directly.
I'm going to jump in. We're having a side conversation in the chat with Torvald. And I just want to say I'm pushing back a little bit on something he just said, where most academic data science jobs are designed for CS and stats. That is not the case anymore. There are faculty jobs in data justice. There are criminal justice data science jobs. It's hard. It may be that it's just more difficult to find them. Our jobs board has a small sampling of these, but there are increasingly data science faculty positions that are not in CS or stats, and more data science departments in schools. So they're degree-bearing institutions. So I'm just jumping in there to mention that since it was mentioned in the chat.
I'll just add one quick thing to that, because I've been interviewing for some of those jobs, and what keeps happening to me, and this could just be about me as a scholar, is that I get the interview for the job, but then they keep picking a candidate that is a actual CS or stats candidate. So it's like you look really interesting and you get through the door, but what people really want maybe appears to be a harder background. That could just be my unique experience, but I do think that is crumbling over time, and there's a more recognition that social sciences are really important in the construction of data, for sure, and that's changing. But I do think there is a strong prior for some of those hiring committees around having CS people. So I think it's just good to keep that in mind as you start your search.
Yeah, excellent point, and hopefully it continues to crumble. I hadn't heard that, and that is a little disappointing.
No, I totally agree, and it's like yet another piece of area where that sort of, I don't want to call it hubris, but there's this idea that like, well, if you're more technical, that's probably the one that you want. And it also underscores, I think, Gonzalo's point, which is that the temptation to present yourself as maybe someone that you're not is potentially very difficult, and maybe in some cases you can't get around it because the world is not ready for the brilliance of social science yet.
Jenna, I just asked you to unmute yourself. If you want to go ahead and ask the question, or.
Hi.
Yay.
Hi, thanks for holding this panel. My name is Yannette. I'm a math major I'm in Oshkosh right now, Wisconsin. So I'm joining from all the way over here. I just have a question. It's kind of a two-part question for everyone. So I'm going to be attending the Midwest Political Science Association conference in April, and I'm reaching out to faculty just who I'm coming across to see if anyone's attending, and if you are, if it'd be okay for me to touch base with you prior, maybe meet. I'll be presenting my poster there, so you're welcome to stop by and see my poster. Just doing a little bit of networking and also just plugging that in. Is anyone attending? Okay, no worries. Well,
I
can't actually hear what you're saying.
Oh, did anyone hear that?
I did. I heard
Okay.
it, and I really wish I were attending, and I would love to like chat with you. That sounds really awesome, and I hope that you meet a lot of awesome people there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's my first time going, so I'm excited to do that.
I had dropped that in the chat for Emily too, so that because it sounds like she's having audio problems. And
Yeah,
this is going to be
the
on YouTube,
conference
so there
link.
might be others that see this and follow up.
I'm also happy to introduce you to or connect you via email to some colleagues if you want to connect. I can drop my email in the chat and tell me what sort of interest you have, because some of my best friends are going to Midwest. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was my question.
Does anyone else have any questions? No? Okay. All right, last chance. Okay, well, thank you everyone. Thank you for attending, and thank you panelists. You're amazing. Thank you for your advice. Yeah, I'll just wrap up the end of our panel then. Bye everyone.
Thanks for putting this together. Great to talk with
Yeah.
everyone.
Good to see you all. Thank you so much.
All right,
Yeah,
bye.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.